Well, it turns out dark energy was not as much of a game changer as you might think, because we already had a slot for it in Einstein's equations. We already had a placeholder. No one had ever measured it before, so we just assumed it was zero and got on with life. The moment it was discovered, we said, hey, now we can stick it in the equation. It's like, whoa! Its presence in the equation shows that there's this force, there's this pressure operating against the action of gravity, making the universe accelerate in its expansion. And that's extraordinary, because it means the day will come where these galaxies that Hubble discovered will move away from us with such speed that they will disappear beyond our horizon, and the total known universe at that time will only be the Milky Way, restoring the state of mind of our universe that existed before 1920. That's a spooky time. We would have to hand down the annals of cosmology from previous centuries to hear about the galaxies that were once in the night sky.
Concern about Congress? Well, I checked these numbers. 57% of Senate, 38% of the House cite law as their profession. And when you look at law, law is, well, what happens in the courtroom. It doesn't go to what's right. It goes to who argues best. And there's this urge, the entire profession is founded on who the best arguers are.
Right. It's not, a courtroom is not about the truth. It's about the theory, if I get what you're saying, is that each side argues their version, and then the truth somehow emerges.
That's the premise. However, the practice, which, for example, is bred in debating teams, for example, where you know the subject, but you don't know what side you're going to be put on to argue.
Right.
And so the act of arguing and not agreeing seems to be fundamental to that profession, and Congress is half that profession. And I realized this when I was a kid. I was 12, and I said, oh, I wonder what profession all these senators and congressmen were. Law, businessman, law. And I said, there are no scientists? Where are the engineers? Where's the rest of life represented here? And so when I look at the conflicts, the argumentative conflicts, I just sit back and say, you know, can I buy an engineer, please? Or put somebody, a business person who knows how to make a hard but significant financial decision, because at the end of the day, they got to make the books work.
But, you know, I think that is part of it.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Do you give people who make this case that was the beginning and that there had to be something that provoked the beginning, do you give them an A at least for trying to reconcile faith and reason?
I don't think they're reconcilable.
What do you mean?
Well, so let me say that differently. All efforts that have been invested by brilliant people of the past have failed at that exercise. They just fail. And so the track record is so poor that going forward I have essentially zero confidence, near zero confidence, that there will be fruitful things to emerge from the effort to reconcile them. So, for example, if you knew nothing about science and you read, say, the Bible, the Old Testament, which in Genesis is an account of nature. That's what that is. And I said to you, give me your description of the natural world based only on this. You would say the world was created in 6 days and that stars are just little points of light, much lesser than the sun. And in fact, they can fall out of the sky, right? Because that's what happens during the Revelation. One of the signs that the second coming is that the stars will fall out of the sky and land on Earth. To even write that means you don't know what those things are. You have no concept of what the actual universe is. So everybody who tried to make proclamations about the physical universe based on Bible passages got the wrong answer. Right. So what happened was, when science discovers things and you want to stay religious, or you want to continue to believe that the Bible is unerring, what you would do is, you would say, well, let me go back to the Bible and reinterpret it. then you'd say things like, oh, they didn't really mean that literally, they meant that figuratively. So this whole sort of reinterpretation of how figurative the poetic passages of the Bible are came after science showed that this is not how things unfolded. And so the educated religious people are perfectly fine with that. It's the fundamentalists who want to say that the Bible is the literal truth of God and want to see the Bible as a science textbook, who are knocking on the science doors of the schools trying to put that content in the science. Enlightened religious people are not behaving that way. They're saying, yes, science is cool, we're good with that, and use the Bible to get your spiritual enlightenment and your emotional fulfillment. 1,000 years ago, the intellectual center of the world was Baghdad. Baghdad. Europe was busy disemboweling heretics at the time. Baghdad was open to all thought at the time, between AD 800 and 1100, around there. If you look at the advances that unfolded in that period, in that location, it includes the invention of algebra. Algebra is an Arabic word. Algorithm is an Arabic word. 2/3 of the stars in the night sky that have names have Arabic names. How does that happen? Where did the naming rights come from? It came from the fact that at that time, huge advances in the Middle East, in Baghdad in particular, was unfolded in engineering, mathematics, especially mathematics, astronomy, navigation, physiology. And you say, well, why is that so? If you look at what was going on, they were open to all lines of thought. Jews, Muslims, Christians. There were doubters back then. Today we would call them atheists. They would all come around a table and share ideas. If you have some philosophy that's got holes in it, someone's going to find it. And you're going to challenge you on those ideas. And what happens is the conversation ratchets up. You discard what doesn't work and you keep what does. And when you do that, you make discoveries, and you make discoveries rapidly. And at the time, that period drew to a close. If you read history books, they'll typically describe sort of the sacking of Baghdad. It was a bad time for the city. And they say, oh, it all came to an end. However, the Islamic culture rose at other times later. And in those other times, science and engineering discoveries were not a part of it. So he asked, why not? You got the cultural heritage, why doesn't it show up again? And then you got to dig a little deeper from the sacking of Baghdad, and you find out there was a Muslim cleric, Al-Ghazali was his name, who was to Islam what St. Augustine was to Christianity. St. Augustine kind of laid out the rules for how to be a good Christian at the time. A lot of people were practicing it in their own way. He codified it. He was a religious scholar, figured it out according to his own read, told everybody how to behave. There's the book. You follow this, you're a good Christian. Al-Ghazali said, you follow this, you're a good Muslim. In that text included the assertion, which gained influence socially, but then politically, so then it had power of influence. In there was the assertion that mathematics and the manipulation of numbers was the work of the devil. The entire enterprise collapsed and never recovered. It has not recovered since. If you look at the number of Muslims who have won the Nobel Prize in the sciences, it's 1. Number of Jews who have won the Nobel Prize? 1/4 of all Nobel Prizes in science have been won by Jews. How many Muslims in the world? 1.3 billion. How many Jews in the world? 15 million tops. So you look at what effect the culture of discovery and learning can have on what you discover about the natural world. It's extraordinary. So, the Large Hadron Collider, the energy inside that particle accelerator will exceed the energy of all accelerators that have ever been built before. Probing nature as never previously imagined.
What is the Higgs boson?
Higgs boson, that's a particle proposed that you can think of it as a kind of it's like think of it like molasses. Okay? Okay, not molasses. It's a field through which all particles move, and the interaction of those particles with that field endows them with the mass that we measure for them. It is granting them the property of mass. We have yet to find this particle, but if we do...
So mass is not explained presently.
That's correct. We just measure...
We don't know why we get fat.
Even if we didn't yet have an answer to it, we should not be ashamed of not having answers to all questions yet. So you shouldn't somehow take the list of questions that the religious community poses to science and say, well, what was around before the Big Bang, and there were this and after death, and I say, I don't know yet, and go on to the next problem. And I'm perfectly happy staring somebody in the face saying, I don't know yet. And we got top people working on it. And so the moment you feel compelled to provide an answer, then you're doing the same thing that the religious community does, providing answers to every possible question. By the way, what science also does is not only answer well-posed questions, it also can put you in a position to judge whether, in fact, the question has meaning in the first place. And because not just because you put nouns and verbs in the right sequence doesn't mean your question has to have any sense at all. If you ask, what is the square root of a pork chop? That doesn't... At what temperature does the numeral 7 melt? Just because you ask that question doesn't obligate me to say, hey, let's fund the lab to answer it.
I think we put too much emphasis on what the meaning of the test is. I test people. It's a way to find out what you know. But don't then say, if you don't know this, therefore the rest of your life is screwed. No, because go find people who are successful in this world. Find, talk show hosts and comedians and novelists and attorneys, and go get the politicians. Put them in a room and say, how many here got straight A's throughout school? None of them are going to raise their hands. By the way, throw in inventors. Throw in all these people. None of them are going to raise their hand. Okay? So Bill Gates dropped out of college. Michael Dell dropped out of college. Those people are not, the success of those people is not measured by how they performed on the exam that you wrote as professor, because they're thinking in ways that you have yet to think, because they're inventing tomorrow. And the only way you can invent tomorrow is if you break out of the enclosure that the school system has provided for you by the exams written by people who are trained in another generation. Here's what concerns me deeply. Everything that we are that distinguishes us from chimps emerges from that 1% difference in DNA. It has to, because that's the difference. The Hubble telescope, that's in that 1%. Maybe everything that we are that is not the chimp is not as smart compared to the chimp as we tell ourselves it is. Maybe the difference between constructing and launching a Hubble telescope and a chimp combining 2 finger motions as sign language, maybe that difference is not all that great. We tell ourselves it is, just the same way we label our books optical illusions. We tell ourselves it's a lot. Maybe it's almost nothing. How would we decide that? Imagine another life form that's 1% different from us in the direction that we are different from the chimp. Think about that. We got 1% difference and we're building the Hubble telescope. Go another 1%. What are we to they? We would be drooling, blithering idiots in their presence. That's what we would be. They would take Stephen Hawking and roll him in front of their primate researchers and say, well, this one is like the most brilliant among them because he can do sort of astrophysics in his head. Oh, isn't that cute? Little Johnny can do that too. Oh, that's so nice. Oh. In fact, Johnny just did that. Let me get it. It's on the refrigerator door. Here he is. He did it in his elementary school class. Think about how smart they would be. Quantum mechanics would be intuitive to their toddlers.
Whole symphonies would be written by their children and, like I said, just put up on the refrigerator door the way our pasta collages are on our refrigerator doors. So the notion that we're going to find some intelligent life and have a conversation with it? When was the last time you stopped to have a conversation with a worm? Or bird? Oh, well, you might have had a conversation, but I don't think you expected an answer, all right? I was born Catholic, raised that way until age 11 or so. And can I just sign it? I'm just going to sign now, because and then as I started learning about the universe, what I was being taught became less and less relevant to anything I cared about. And now what's interesting is that 40% of scientists in America are religious, as measured by the following, and because don't measure whether you go to church every week, because some people go to church just for the social scene or for the cupcakes. You want to ask a question where it's meaningful when someone says they're religious. So the question you ask is, do you pray to a personal God who would then intervene with life and society? And if you do that, you're religious. That's a clean way to do that. 40% of American scientists answer yes to that question. That includes physicists, astrophysicists. There's a range among them. Engineers and mathematicians are a little higher. They're up around 60%. Astrophysicists, physicists, biologists are lower. They're down around 25, but it averages 40. Now, here's the difference. Those who are productive scientists and answer yes to that question do not go to the Bible as a source of their science. The Bible is just another part of their life. It's their spiritual part of their life. And they do their science in their science books. You get into problems when people try to get science out of the Bible and then influence the science curriculum in a science classroom.
Right.
That is a whole other thing.
Like saying that the Earth is only 1,000 years
exactly, 6,000 years old. That's a whole other thing happening in America right now that would undermine the science curriculum. By the way, science and religion have been coexistent forever.
Yeah.
The difference is there's no tradition of scientists knocking down the Sunday school door, telling the preacher what to teach. That's never happened. But you find people today, religious fundamentalists typically, trying to knock down the science classroom, trying to tell the science teacher what to teach. And I cry foul when that happens. We've had this happy coexistence forever. And so those who are religious are, those aren't the ones saying the Earth is 6,000 years old. They're,
So you're not moving to Kansas.
no, or if I do, I gotta.
We gotta go. No more
There you go.
questions.
Okay, I gotta run.
Is graviton discovered yet?
Is what? Is what?
Graviton?
No, still not discovered. Still not discovered. The last, there's a good book on that called Einstein's Unfinished Symphony.
Okay.
It's all about the search for gravity waves and graviton.
Thank you so much.
Did I sign that yet? Yeah, I get it. Okay,
Thanks.
good. I can walk. I have a special pen for this. All right. If NASA weren't around, what would happen to our universe? Well, I can tell you this. If NASA weren't here, we would know a lot less about the universe. And we would be intellectually impoverished by that fact. Because I enjoy knowing where we are, where we came from, and where we're going. And those questions are answered from space. To know how Earth got here, how the sun got here, what the future of Earth will be, what the future of our sun will be. Will we need to leave Earth and find another planet? All of that comes to us from the discoveries of a space program. Much of those discoveries have come from NASA. So it's not that the universe would be different if NASA never existed. It's that we would be different in a way that I don't even want to think about.
So we wouldn't know a single thing about the universe.
Yeah, we wouldn't know a single thing about the universe. We'd just be rummaging on Earth's surface thinking that our solutions to all our problems come from looking down rather than from looking up.